From textbook to kitchen, or out of the clinic and onto your table, we are talking about living better and longer after cancer by following a plant-based eating pattern. Now, please don't let the words plant-based freak you out, lead you a place of fear or frustration, or give me the inevitable eye roll. The broad-based definition of plant-based eating does not mean being vegan or vegetarian. And a plant-based diet actually does include eating foods from animals. The definition of plant-based eating means getting about 2/3 of your foods from plants, which includes fruits, vegetables, grains, and beans, and about 1/3 of your foods from animal-based foods, such as fish, poultry, dairy, and lean red meats. Plant-based diets have been shown to help minimize the risk of getting a new cancer, help minimize the risk of cancer recurrence, as well as protecting us all against the other big human diseases, including heart disease, diabetes, and stroke. In this episode of the Recovery Room podcast, we are talking with an expert oncology dietitian. She'll tell us again exactly what plant-based means, why it helps, what it helps, where to go in the grocery store, what does it do to improve your health, and what does it look like on your plate? And ultimately, the best ways to prepare these foods and how to make lasting change over time. She'll also give us general easy tips and her favorite eating after cancer website. This is the Recovery Room podcast discussing all things cancer and cancer recovery. At the time of this recording, the Recovery Room podcast is a young podcast, and we will best grow with the support of our audience. So please help us reach more cancer patients and survivors by hitting the subscribe, like, and share buttons on this and all Recovery Room podcasts that you find helpful. This particular podcast was recorded during a pretty nasty storm here in the Midwest region of the United States, so please forgive some of the glitches in the internet connection and recording. Thanks again for being here. I'm Dr. Leslie Walke, your friendly neighborhood oncology physical therapist. Glad to have you here. Enjoy the show. Mandy Mindin, registered oncology dietitian extraordinaire. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So I have like gazillions of questions for you.
Bring them on.
I know. I love that about you. So because I have a gazillion questions, because my patients have a gazillion questions, and obviously this is not even remotely near my area of expertise. So in this episode, I want to talk about specifically plant-based eating, plant-based diet. So we're going to talk about what it is, why it's good, what's the data, and then what does it look like on somebody's plate? That's another big translation from textbook to kitchen, and then we can touch on some other stuff. So can you just begin by telling us what is plant-based eating?
Absolutely. So, defining something with numerical value behind it, I like to try and do for people. So it's about 2/3 or more of all the foods that you are eating during the day. They should try to come from a plant. So that's where that plant-based eating pattern comes from.
Okay.
What's coming from a plant? Well, so I can define that a little further.
Yep, please
Fruit,
do.
Vegetable, whole grains also count as a plant, and then beans or legumes as well. So You've got the 2/3 over here of the plant-based foods, and then the 1/3 or less should come from an animal. So those would be your poultry, your fish, your dairy items, and lean red meats.
Okay.
This idea emphasizes whole food, the minimally processed foods, and now processed kind of gets a bad rap too. We're specifically talking about packaged items. So the more something is changed from its original origin, the more processing it has gone through.
Okay.
And then also looking at reducing the added sugar intake following this eating pattern with moderate, high quality. I'm going to pause for a second. High quality animal products.
Okay. Very good. All right. So that's what plant-based eating is. So is there any evidence that this is better for a cancer survivor than a regular diet? Or what's the data? Why is it good?
Yep, absolutely. So, and really quickly, just to clarify, because plant-based I don't want it to be a fear word, if you will, because
Right.
it doesn't mean that you would be a vegetarian or a vegan, for instance. It's not that you're never going to eat the dairy or meat items. Instead, it's more of proportionally choosing more of your foods from the plant sources.
Okay.
And nutrition research in the past has heavily examined plant-based eating patterns for those benefits, as you mentioned, Leslie. So they particularly looked at the Mediterranean diet as the plant-based form, if you will. And that one would be your fresh fruits, your fresh vegetables, the whole grains, and then those lean proteins coming into play. And it reduced overall risk of actually quite a bit of diseases. So yes, you have your certain cancers that come into play, but then also we've got the cardiac and we have some diabetes in there that come into play. So it just really confirms that the variety of plant-based foods can honestly help not just reducing risk for cancer, but different types of diseases across the board from the variety of nutrients and minerals that you are getting from those plant-based items.
Right. And most people with cancer will die of heart disease.
Right.
So it's so important so when I talk about exercise and all these other things, I'm like, we're so focused. Yeah, you want to focus on cancer because you don't want it to come back. You still have to realize that there's so many other things that will try to kill us in this world. So
it's unfortunately, I see a lot of the trifecta, I call it, and it's my cancer patients, but then like you mentioned, the heart disease and then the diabetes.
Yes.
So truly a plant, the plant-based is really trying to get toward improving risk of any of those or recurrence along with that.
Okay. All right. So patient A just gets told they have to eat should eat a plant-based diet. So what do they do when they go to the grocery store? What does it look like on their plate? How do they do it? I think that's the big transition from clinic to kitchen to home. What do people do?
Absolutely. I think that's really where we need to nail it in there too for hitting that home run, because we can tell people left and right and explain things in handouts out, but really making sure that transitions over to actual home life and environment.
Right.
And this actually, taking a step back too, I meant to mention as well, the risk of reducing diseases, but also it increases overall fiber intake because those fruits, those vegetables, and those whole grains are so high in that nutrient. So that's another benefit. But back to the how. So this is probably my favorite piece to talk about when I'm in clinic. Really, patients just like to keep it simple as well as myself. So I always tell them to start small because people always want to jump 100% in, make a change. It's black and white. I'm going to do it, Mandy. And I'm like, let's baby step it. There's nothing wrong with baby steps. That's success too. So I think a great way to begin would be, looking at one meal. Look at one meal or look at one ingredient. Okay. Start with one item at a time. It may not seem big picture, but again, once we change the eating pattern in general and you become used to this way of eating, it will become more enjoyable. It will feel like it's going to be successful and you will feel that encouragement. So I always say start with one. Okay. Then I send my patients to look and do their own research. And I say that with a grain of salt. So just search for a few things on the internet, enticing plant-based recipes that are really simple to prepare. And that would be no more than 3 or 4 ingredients. Again, it's really trying to start small and baby step it into it. I often actually send them to Pinterest. There's a lot of recipes on that site, but Cook for Your Life is a really wonderful oncology source that I myself actually pull a lot of recipes off the web. Cook for Your Life.
For Your Life. Okay.
So research is my next tip. And then I know this was pretty hot and heavy. I think for a while it's been pretty hot and heavy, but cooking a meatless dish. So you hear, meatless Monday and whatnot, but any day of the week, it wouldn't matter. But just choosing one dish, it doesn't have to be a whole day. Just, I want to do lunch and then make a veggie pizza, for example. So taking your standard pizza that you would usually get pepperoni or sausage on, and just, you could even, if you got both of those, remove the sausage only from it and then add bell peppers, for instance. Okay. So there you are bringing in one vegetable source and you're changing that dish around to work toward more of a plant-based dish.
Okay. So can you describe for me like a plant-based breakfast?
Yep. In that sense, it could be your standard just pancakes if you wanted, and then grabbing a side dish of that half of a cup of mixed berries for the fruit piece.
Okay.
I encourage my patients to try and go for at least 2 to 3 different food groups a day per meal. So, you've got the carbohydrates, the whole grains right there. You've got the fruit with the mixed berries, and then maybe you could grab a glass of milk, or if you wanted to do a vegetable with breakfast, you could do a side of sauteed mushrooms, for instance. So then that would be your 3 different food groups, and that would be your plant-based eating pattern as well right there.
Okay. All right. So when somebody goes to the grocery store, what do they throw into their cart? So you've mentioned berries, so strawberries, blueberries, grapes. What kind of nuts and legumes do you recommend? What do I put in my cart?
Yep. So I would say, I know it's been really mentioned across the board. A lot of other dietitians out there I've heard as well say shop the perimeter, but I'm going to kind of debunk that a little bit. Yes, you've got the perimeter, of course, offering you the fruits and the vegetables on both sides, so the fresh and the frozen. And I will say a little PSA here. Frozen is just as good for you as fresh. Yeah. So you've got the same nutrients, even though they're frozen. And bonus, they're cheaper typically, and you can have them longer in your freezer.
Yeah, very good.
So lots of tips there. But the middle of the grocery store, not bad guy. Right. So I know that's where we find all of the packaged items and the canned items. However, as you just mentioned, the beans and legumes are found in the middle in a can. So when you are picking out beans, I would say it can truly be any type of bean. If you prefer chickpea over black bean, that's fine. I point people to try and choose the low sodium options, the no salt added. If your grocery store does not have that, that's okay. I would put your beans in a strainer or legumes in a strainer and rinse them off. So even though it still has the same amount of sodium in there, you can still get some off in the rinsing process. Okay. Otherwise, parameter-wise, yes, I am telling people to shop for the mixed berries. And, those have all the antioxidants to them, absolutely. But sometimes you have to shop by season. So it really kind of varies what's in at the moment, what I'm telling people to get. But I'm always emphasizing variety. Make sure you're not just eating only the orange vegetables, for instance. Make sure you're getting in some sort of color, red bell pepper, and then you're doing broccoli over here. Make sure that you're not eating the same fruits all the time because, again, we really want to hone in on trying to get a variety of nutrients. So you're doing bananas, you're doing berries, maybe you want apples. So it's main key is variety. And again, I'll say that the parameter is wonderful, but make sure we go all around the store and not just staying in the fresh produce area.
And does it matter how you prepare your vegetables? Grilling, steaming, frying, boiling? So I tell a lot of people it just is taste preference, really. I'm never going to talk someone out of wanting to prepare something a certain way if they truly enjoy it. With that being said, though, if something is boiled too long, some of those nutrients do get lost in the water. Okay. So I push people toward if they want that softer vegetable item, broccoli, for instance, is a simple example, try and steam it because then at least it's losing minimal amounts of nutrients coming from that because it's not actually in that water base. Roasting is wonderful. It's got a really nice flavor profile and people, at least my patients, really tend to enjoy the crunch to things. And then seasonings, I always encourage people to play with too, because even if they aren't big, huge vegetable fans, because that tends to be the food group that I get pushed back on a lot, I just encourage people to toy with those different types of cooking actually, because they can surprise themselves sometimes where they actually are like, oh, Mandy, I hate peas. And I'm like, well, have we tried it in different dishes or tried it with different seasonings? So I actually encourage everyone to toy around with different ways of prepping food. Okay. So meat is not the enemy. Meat's not going to kill everybody, but how we do want to minimize how much we eat or at least keep track of it. So what about red meat, fish, poultry? How much can you have? How much is okay? What's too much? Can you get too little? Tell us about that. Absolutely. So first, I always say, let's start with changing the way we think about meat. So it's not about
Never, right? I don't like using the word avoid and,
Right.
banishing anything. So it's more about thinking smaller amounts of the red meat, basically it's about how to do it, right? So change the meat from the center of our dish to a side dish instead.
Okay.
So that'll help change the sizing of how much portions we're eating. So can you ever eat red meat and fish and poultry? Absolutely. Plant-based means mostly plant-based, not avoiding animal products completely.
Okay.
So the recommendation for this food group would be consuming between 12 to 18 ounces of red meat per week. I like to give a visual for people because I don't ever expect my patients or friends or family who are asking me advice to go and go buy scales or go buy, measuring tools, right? I actually say use the size of your palm. So right here, the size of your palm is about 3 to 4 ounces of a serving. Okay. So that can kind of just be that eyeball when you're looking at your plate. Oh, maybe I've got a little too much here. So it's a nice way to gauge it and not feel like, oh my gosh, I am measuring everything because Mandy told me to. Like, that's not what we're going for. So palms are really nice gauging for the 3 to 4 ounces.
Okay.
So, and that would be cooked. So when going back to the 12 to 18 per week, it's the cooked amount. And then another visual way to kind of gauge that would be the thickness could be the size of like a deck of cards, for instance. Okay. So when we're gauging that, also, if you don't want to think of it in a week long, it's like 6 times per week. Well, so 6 times per week would be the 3 ounces, or if you want to switch it around, it will be the 6 ounces 3 times a week. So you can pick and choose. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, I only can do it like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You can break it up. You can eat however you would like. Right. Benefits to these items, absolutely. And that's why I actually recommend some of my patients to bring lean red meat back in. And when I say lean red meat, I mean like meats with loin at the end. Sirloin, tenderloins are very nice lean cuts of meat. 20% of that beef is another example of those lean choices. So red meat provides vitamin B12. Can't find that in plant-based items solely. So that's why that has to come into play as a player in your game, because it is really important nutrient, a vitamin to help with energy. And it also has a good amount of protein. And protein really is your best friend during cancer treatment, but also afterward. And actually, in any time in life, I think it's just a really good macronutrient for you to be consuming enough. And I know your average person, myself included, has a hard time trying to make sure we get enough in. So red meat's another nice option. And then chicken and fish, along with providing the protein, they provide omega-3s, which it's considered a nice lean. It's a decrease in saturated fat. So we're, when we're looking at the fats, we're always trying to reduce how much of that saturated fat we're going for. Chicken and fish can do that for us.
Okay. All right. Well, this has been so helpful.
Small steps make big differences, I like to say.
Yeah, I like that. That's very true with exercise as well. So,
yes.
All right. Well, Mandy, thank you so much. This has been very helpful in clearing this up, and I really appreciate your expertise and look forward to you coming back to the show another time.
Great. Thanks for having me, Leslie. I appreciate it.
Thanks. And here is your episode recap. Again, a plant-based diet does not mean avoiding meats. It means getting to about 2/3 of your foods from plant sources and about 1/3 from lean meats and dairy. The variety of nutrients and minerals in a plant-based diet has been shown to help minimize cancer recurrence, help decrease the risk of a new cancer, as well as protect us from heart disease, stroke, obesity, and diabetes. Remember, baby steps are steps, and any change in the positive direction will yield health results. You don't have to be perfect. The changes you make need to be gradual and enjoyable to be sustainable. And remember, the palm of your hand is a great way to measure one serving size of meats. Mandy's favorite eating and cooking after cancer website is cookforyourlife.org. I will have the link in the show notes. And remember that fresh and frozen fruits and vegetables have similar health benefits. And also conventionally grown and organically grown foods also have similar health benefits. So feel free to buy what is best for you and your pocketbook. And there is no need to demonize the middle of the grocery store or any other particular food for that matter. Any food is okay occasionally. Remember, it's an overall pattern of eating over time that will affect your health, not the occasional ice cream cone or cookie. Thank you again for joining me in the Recovery Room podcast. Treat yourself like you are the most important person on this planet because you are, and exercise like your life depends on it because it does. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.